So Paul's going to tell us these two stories from his own existence, from his own experience, about times where he has had to make the call to place love over liberty, okay? And it comes down to a couple of decisions that he made that in turn that I would say we need to make. So let's take a look at the first decision that we're going to look at in chapter 9. You and I this week need to make the decision to set aside liberties to better love the family. So I'm going to say to myself, okay, I'm going to make the decision. I may set aside something that's perfectly good, perfectly okay, but I'm going to set that aside because it means that my family, my church family, so on, will take a step in the right direction. And do you see what he's saying here? Okay, now let's bring this into our world. It may be that you're engaged in a perfectly good pursuit. Nothing at all wrong with it. But because of the specific context of your family, of your church, whatever it may be, the best thing that you could do would be to set that perfectly noble pursuit aside. That liberty, that freedom that you've been enjoying. You just say, I'm just going to set that aside. I'm not going to do that. Why? Because it's not the most loving thing that I can do for my family, for my church. So I'm going to set that over here. So we're going to have to come to the point where Paul says, you got to make the decision to set aside your liberty because you love people, you love your family, you love your church family. And some of y'all are up against this right now in big time ways. You are pursuing liberty. Maybe you're doing things that are okay, maybe you're not doing things that are okay. But you are pursuing liberty, and it's all about just, I get to do whatever I want, and I'm going to go life below zero on everybody I know. It's all about maximum liberty, and if you don't like that, then just too bad. And Paul says you can't live that way. You've got to be willing, if you're going to enjoy the relationships, if you're going to invest in others, if you're going to be a part of a church that's unified around the gospel, then it means that you're going to have to make decisions to set aside perfectly good liberties. Because it's not, in this circumstance, the most loving thing to do. And I don't know, 5 years from now, I may be hunting like crazy again. I don't know my circumstances. I can just tell you that I knew at that moment, at that time, this was the right call for me because it would be more loving for me to invest that time, energy, money elsewhere. Are you guys with me? So that's one thing that he points out. Then the next decision he sets up is this one. And this one is even more difficult, okay? If you think that one, if you're going, oh man, he wants me to do, no, now it gets really hard, okay? Make the decision to set aside all liberty to better share the gospel. So we've been talking about sharing, or rather denying some liberties for the betterment of my family, the betterment of my church. Y'all with me? Now he says, but when it comes to sharing the gospel, I'm going to set aside 100% of my liberty. Now the conversation shifts from liberties to liberty, okay? And Paul is thinking about those people who are far from God, okay? Who have nothing to do with God. And he doesn't just evaluate his habits and make small changes here and here and here. He says, listen, if I'm around somebody that needs to know the gospel, I'm going to make whatever wholesale change I need to make because the gospel is that important. I don't want my liberty to be a barrier to them hearing the gospel. You got it? You get it? He's saying, hey, I love my lost friends too. And I want them to hear the gospel. And I'll become a slave if I have to. The gospel is that important. I mean, I'll give it all up. And you all, we deal with the same reality every day. Some of you all in your workplace right now, you've got a coworker and their sexual identity, the way they express themselves in that arena is all over the map. And when you're around them, it's a challenge for you. What Paul is saying is this. He's saying, I would look at that coworker and yeah, I'd have all kinds of questions. It'd give me all kinds of pause, the lifestyle they're choosing. It's very different. But I'm going to find a way to love that coworker. And I'm going to find a way to let them know that I love them. I'm under Christ. That doesn't change. But I'm going to find a way to love that person because the gospel is that important. Because without the gospel, they have no hope at all. And I can't stand the thought of that. So I want to make sure that all the time, love is greater than liberty. Just look at that formula again. Bring it on up again. There we go. I'm going to make sure that that's how I'm living. And I'm going to live that way toward my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I'm going to live that way toward my own family. And I'm going to live that way toward people who are far from God. I'm going to place my love for God and my love for others above my own freedom and my own liberty.